And a good Friday morning to you on Friday, October 24th, 2025. Sam Levitt with you inside our 97.3 The Fan studios. Another day, another fill-in for Ben and Woods from 8 to 10 a.m. this morning. Hope you enjoyed the best of Ben and Woods from 6 to 8. Now I'll take you up until 10 a.m. when we flip things over to the Braden Serprenant Show. Sam Levitt here inside the studios. It is just an ugly day here in Kearney Mesa. I mean, from a San Diego standpoint, I don't know that I've quite seen, looking out the window here in the studios, as cloudy, as misty, as ugly of a day, of a morning, that we've had in San Diego in my time here. I'm dead serious about it. It is uncharacteristically ugly. So if you're driving around this morning, stay safe, take it slow. Roads might be a little bit wet, might be raining in some different parts of the county this morning. So take it slow. Visibility not great either. So that's what we're dealing with on this Friday morning. Ben and Woods will be back with you on Monday. I know Woodsy is still out there in Arizona tweeting away. And what's interesting about the Woodsy tweets is not so much the content. Now, it doesn't sound like it was going particularly well because Woodsy at 10:19 p.m. last night, and I said this yesterday, the time of the tweets is what really stands out to me because Woods is usually in bed by like 6:30, 7 p.m. So the fact that he's in Arizona up at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., that's remarkable in and of itself. But Woodsy's saying, well, he has an expletive in there, so I can't say that. But he said, I'll paraphrase here, wow, we won a game. So it was not going particularly well for Stephen Woods Ball Club in Arizona, but apparently they did finish things up with a win yesterday. And again, Ben Woods, Paul, they will be back with you on Monday, I'm sure, with many, many tales of Woods' weekend in Arizona and what Ben and Paul have been up to as well. We've got a good show lined up for you up here until 10 a.m. We'll talk plenty of Padres baseball. Yesterday we talked so much about the managerial situation, and we'll touch on that here in the opening segment a little bit more, maybe put a little bow on the manager search, because quite frankly, we don't have a lot of news for you. It's been a very slow news week after what was such a whirlwind of a first couple of weeks of the offseason with Mike Schilt retiring, and now we enter this new phase of looking for a manager for 2026. But really the last handful of days, there has not been a ton of news, but we'll touch on the managerial search a little bit. We'll take a wider look at the Padres roster and break down what I think is by far and away the most glaring need on this team right now entering the offseason. So we'll talk about that. We'll preview game one of the World Series tonight between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. We'll touch on the NFL. We'll touch on some different stories from around the wide world of sports. Before I do all that, I do have Adam Klug with me here in the studio. Adam, how are you? Good morning.
Doing great, making sure to turn our mic volumes all the way up here.
Yes, I know.
Why would anybody turn the mic volume
Well, you
down?
know what? Now, I want to say something. This is
Am I
not
blaming Scraby?
Well,
yes,
yeah,
I am.
Yes. Well, this is not criticism of you, but I will say yesterday morning, our first morning doing this
is not
together,
a criticism of you, but
you were on it. Like, I had this sheet ready with the reads. We went over timings. We went over traffic.
There we go.
I mean, it's 7:58 a.m. I don't have the sheet with the reads. You didn't have me test the mics like you did yesterday.
Diva Sammy.
So, but I do owe you today, and I can't be too hard on you today because even though it's a big sports weekend in San Diego, and we'll touch on that in a second, I am heading out for a few days, for about a week, actually. I'm going to New York, see my parents, spend a little time back in New York, which will be nice. And you were kind enough to offer a ride to the airport later. So that's going to be a nice experience for us.
Be careful what you say, huh?
Well, it'll be nice. This is not the first time we've been in the car together. We had a trip home from LA.
I just mean, when you're killing me for a little mess up
All
here.
right.
You know?
Yes, I got you. But hopefully we'll head to the airport later. All will be good there. Now that I'm looking out at the weather, I hope my flight is not delayed or anything with this foggy weather. So hopefully it'll clear up as the late morning and afternoon rolls along. Like I said, it's a big sports weekend in San Diego, despite the Padres not being in game one of the World Series tonight. Let me give you a little breakdown of what's going on this weekend. San Diego State football tomorrow at Fresno State. And look, the Aztecs have been really good this year. Sean Lewis has done a really nice job in year 2 with the program. SDSU is 5-1 overall, 2-0 in the Mountain West. Fresno State, who they'll go up and play tomorrow, they're 5-2, 2-1 in the conference. Tomorrow at Fresno State at 12:30 p.m. Now, Boise State's currently leading the Mountain West at 3-0 in conference. They play against Nevada tonight, so you'll have a little bit of a better idea the opportunity for the Aztecs tomorrow. Hypothetically, if Nevada beats Boise State tonight, the Aztecs could be playing for first place alone tomorrow to remain undefeated. So big game tomorrow at Fresno State for San Diego State football. So that's item number 1 on what's a nice sports weekend. Item number 2, San Diego FC playing their first ever playoff game on Sunday at 6:30 at Snapdragon Stadium. First game in a best-of-3 series against the Portland Timbers. We're still waiting for word on whether Chucky Lozano is going to be a part of that game on Sunday. We touched on that story yesterday. Chucky was not with the team. Their last game they played in Portland, bit of an internal conflict there after he was benched in the game. I believe it was on October 4th. So still waiting to hear on that, whether Chucky Lozano will be a part of the SDFC plans for Sunday. But lo and behold, I mean, it's a really exciting day for SDFC, their first ever playoff game, number 1 seed in the West. They have a very legitimate shot to win an MLS Cup. I thought it was interesting. Darnay Tripp of NBC7, who we had on the show yesterday, kind of laid out pretty nicely some other expansion teams that have had regular season success where that success is not quite translated to the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how San Diego FC does. Again, that game on Sunday at 6:30 at Snapdragon Stadium. And then, of course, outside the San Diego perspective, we have game 1 of the World Series in Toronto tonight between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. Yes, I would imagine we're all rooting for the Blue Jays here at San Diego, as we should be, rightfully so. However, it is the World Series. It is game 1. I would imagine many of you will be tuned into a World Series game 1 tonight. Trey Savage on the mound for Toronto, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But really a remarkable story if you haven't been following the postseason since the Padres got knocked out. This is a guy who began the year at single A, and now he's starting game 1 of the World Series for the Blue Jays. He'll go up against former Padre Blake Snell on the mound in game 1 for the Dodgers tonight. So nice sports weekend, really is. Aztecs tomorrow, SDFC on Sunday, and World Series game 1 tonight. All the college football, NFL football tomorrow as well. We may touch on a few of those stories as the morning rolls along. Before we get to the Padres roster, I do want to tie what I'll try to make a tidy bow on our conversation from yesterday. Because look, yesterday we spent the first hour almost exclusively talking about the Albert Pujols situation, the idea that Albert Pujols could be the skipper of the Padres in 2026, reportedly interviewed with the Padres on Wednesday. And to be honest with you, aside from that, we don't have concrete information on much else. We know Brian Esposito reportedly, Dennis Lynn of The Athletic reported it earlier this week, that the club spoke with their bench coach from the last couple of years, Brian Esposito, on Monday. I think Brian Esposito is a really, really good candidate, certainly would provide continuity, worked under Mike Schultz the last couple of years. You would imagine, although not reported anywhere, not confirmed anywhere, that the Padres have had discussions with these guys, but you would imagine guys like Ruben Niebla, Mark Loretta, perhaps, guys that are really well respected in the organization. They'll be a part of the process as well. And I saw a comment after our show yesterday that kind of stuck with me. And I'll phrase it a little bit differently than the comment. But I did come away from yesterday's show after we spent so much time talking about Albert Pujols. And I think it's rightfully so when you have that kind of name in the mix. And for all the reasons I laid out yesterday, such an intriguing name, just a fascinating name for so many reasons. The idea that he would become the next manager of the San Diego Padres. But I did ask myself after the show was over, Have we put too many eggs in the Albert Pujols basket? And what I mean by that is, are we going to look at a situation now from a fan perspective where, well, we know Albert's interviewed. I think there are a lot of fans who are cheering hard right now for that to be the pick, and I understand it. There are a lot of pros to it. There's a lot of good arguments for a guy like Albert Pujols. But have we put our eggs a little too much in that basket in the sense of, are we taking away from what other candidates would bring, the strength of other candidates? Are we even overlooking some of the arguments against a guy like an Albert Pujols? Because if you think about the conversation we had yesterday, I mean, I spent 15, 20 minutes talking about the pros. How much time did I spend talking about the cons? I don't know, 5, right? Because the cons are easy to see. The cons are he's never been a manager. He's never been a coach at the major league level. I mean, that's really what it is. And yes, you can talk about, can he work with the front office? Can he take input? All those things that I think are important in 2025 in being a major league manager. I don't think we've put too many eggs in the Albert Pujols basket. Here's the way I look at it in a general sense. The reality is, you just don't know until these guys take the job. We see so many situations, and I think the Tony Vitello situation with the Giants is kind of a classic example of it. You can have your case for, you can have your case against. There's a case for a guy like Tony Vitello in San Francisco. There's a case against. There's a whole lot of people who think that's going to be a disaster. There's a whole lot of people, including apparently Buster Posey, who think it's going to work wonders, who think it's going to work out great. And you know what? And I know it sounds cliche. We find out in the results. We find out over the course of games, over the course of the next couple of years. So I will say this. Albert Pujols could be great. He could not be great. Ruben Niebla could lead a team to a World Series. That could not happen. Brian Esposito, Mark Loretta, all these names. You just don't know until they actually go out there and stand at that top step. And I'll say this again. In baseball, is a manager important? Yes. Is it important for clubhouse culture, for identity, for managing personalities, for managing a team, a bullpen, a lineup? Absolutely. But the reality is, and this is why we're going to switch gears today and talk more about the team itself. The reality is what your roster is and how they perform on a day-to-day basis on the field. That's what really makes a manager, right? The manager doesn't step into the right-handed batter's box and hit a 425-foot home run. He's not the guy who does that. In baseball in particular, it's really about the guys you have and your team. So I think it's fair to spend a lot of time on Pujols. I don't want to overlook the other guys, though. I think guys like Ruben, and by the way, there are probably in the next week or two going to be a lot of names externally that get thrown around. I'd almost be shocked knowing AJ Preller and how he's gone about this process in prior years. If you remember, it took the Padres a while to hire Mike Schilt, to hire an internal candidate who had been around the organization the last couple of years. It took him a while. That was a process that took weeks. In fact, if I recall correctly, that was a process that got to a point where I even think some people on this radio station were wondering what has taken so long. And if I recall correctly, and I almost want to not say this before I double check, I don't think they had the introductory press conference for Mike until right before Thanksgiving. And Adam, maybe you can look that up and confirm it for me. So my point is, we've spent a lot of time talking about Albert Pujols, rightfully so. We're also going to spend a lot of time talking about whoever else interviews, right? Brian Esposito, it's been reported he has. You would imagine Ruben will. Mark Loretta is a name that's been popular to put in these conversations, rightfully so. Maybe he's going to be part of the process. Maybe there are other names internally that are part of the process. But I can almost guarantee you that there are going to be external candidates, and knowing how this went last time, where they ended up with an internal candidate. Now, that was a little bit different too, because remember, Bob Melvin left. They had to get through that whole saga with Bob. So maybe that plays a little bit into it as well. But we know with AJ Preller, he doesn't typically do this quickly. I don't think this is going to be something where by the end of next week, the Padres necessarily have a hire. Now, I could be totally wrong about that. By the end of next week, World Series could be over. Padres could have their guy. We could be having a press conference by the end of next week. Just knowing how this worked last time, I don't know that I necessarily expect it to go that quick. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of names thrown around here, and there is a legitimate possibility that a name we have not even said on this radio station, discussed at all, is the guy. So we'll see. Yes, Adam.
So Mike Schultz's introductory press conference was November 21st of 23.
Yeah, it was right before Thanksgiving. Yes.
But here's my 2 cents on what you said about not being next week. Mike Schultz was late. He was an internal candidate, right?
Mhm.
He's kind of there. The internal candidate is there to fall back on. If AJ Preller finds his guy next week, I think you could make it higher next week if you find your guy and he's outside the organization. If it is an internal candidate, if it's Ruben Niebla, let's say, maybe that is something that happens later in the offseason because they're doing due diligence and speaking with many other candidates and ultimately decide on someone who's already under contract, already on staff, and isn't going anywhere.
Well, to your point, and we can touch on this after the break as well. To your point, and I really don't want to spend a ton of time today on the managerial search because we did it so much yesterday. But I do think you make an interesting point in alluding to the idea. Let's say Albert Pujols walked in there walked in there on Wednesday and just wowed, blew the Padres away.
Right, they could be negotiating with him right now. Could be, is all I'm saying.
And you walk away from that meeting saying, this is our guy. This is 100% our guy. The decision makers look at it and say, we don't even need to talk to anybody else. We don't need to make this a process that goes into mid to late November.
But it's not just that. You're also competing against other organizations for the same candidates.
Sure. And look, that's a good point. Look, it hasn't been reported that, and it sounds like the Orioles have had interest in Albert. It has not been reported that he's gone there and talked to the Baltimore Orioles. So you make a good point. You wouldn't. I think the idea that if it is going to be Albert Pujols, the idea that could happen sooner rather than later is very real possibility. It's almost hard to imagine this process playing out for weeks if Albert's going to be the guy, because it almost feels, and in fairness, with a guy of his stature, it kind of makes sense where he'd walk in the building, you're wowed, you decide you want to go in that direction. You want to go in the direction of elite former player, a guy who doesn't have managerial experience, which, by the way, I'm not criticizing. That's fine if they want to go in that direction. But once you've decided that, well, then what else is there to talk about, right? So I'm with you. I think if it is Albert, it could happen a little bit quicker than we realize. However, the history of how they've done these things would say maybe it's going to take a little while. We shall see. All right, we'll talk more about the Padres roster. We're going to do kind of a wide roster assessment when we come back. I'm going to run down the 40-man and the 26 and figure out, okay, who are locks on this team right now? Who's kind of in the mix right now in the 40-man? Obviously, there's going to be free agent signings, trades, all that. We're so far away from actually getting to this point, but hey, something to talk about here on this Friday morning. And then we'll really dive into what I think by far and away is the most glaring need the Padres have right now heading into 2026. Before we do all that on this foggy, ugly morning in San Diego, stay safe out there on the roads. Let's check in with Kelly Danick. 8:27 a.m. here on 97.3 The Fan on this Friday morning. Sam Levitt with you, filling in for Ben and Woods up until 10 a.m. when we flip things over to the Braden Surprenant Show. We are live and local the rest of the day here on 97.3 The Fan. Braden and Frank with you from 10 to 2. And we've got Gwen and Chris from 2 to 6. The award-winning Scraby Show from 6 to 7 p.m. Oh, Scraby, what a guy he is. I just love that Scraby. I really, really do. Scraby will be with you until...
Man, I am stinking up the joint.
Well, I don't love that. I don't know what. I've never heard that.
I am an idiot.
Yeah, that's about right. That's correct, Matt Scraby. Matt Scraby will be with you.
Wow, it is raining really hard. This is being cool here on the Entercom Empire. So if you're sitting out there.
Scraby sounds like he's 12 years old in that clip. So, yeah. Oh, Scraby. But speaking of rain, it's not getting better out there. It just gets worse. I mean, the fog. So hopefully my flight can take off a little bit later this afternoon. Anyway, all guests on 97.3 The Fan appear on the David P. Shapiro Fan Hotline. David P. Shapiro, criminal defense attorneys, helping good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime since 2010. Visit davidpshapirolaw.com. We'll get to the roster breakdown in our next segment. We're going to have a pretty short segment here because, well, you know, me a little bit inexperienced with the general hourly clock schedule. I went a little bit long in the last segment. See, I told you I wasn't going to talk about the manager search, and I went beyond where I should have went with the manager search. So Adam did make a good point, though, right when and we kind of touched on this at the very end, just to revisit it quickly. Adam made a good point to me right when we went to break, which is if you're going to hire Albert Pujols, it's probably going to be a lot quicker than if you're going to hire somebody internally. Now, it's not 100% the truth necessarily. They could decide they want to hire somebody by the end of next week internally and do it and done. Press conference, we move on. But the point is, with Albert Pujols, if there are other teams that are interested in hiring him and he's interested to going to another team, not named the San Diego Padres, then yes, has to be probably sooner rather than later. So that is a little aspect to consider when we continue to talk about the Padres managerial search. Let's touch on the two rosters for game one of the World Series being put out just within the last half hour or so. We know the pitching matchup, kind of a fascinating pitching matchup. You know, Blake Snell, he's been terrific so far in the postseason for the Dodgers. But Trey Savage, who has just been a breakout star of this postseason, really a remarkable story, began the year at single A. He was drafted last year, makes a couple of starts towards the end of the season, and he's been, for the most part, really, really good for Toronto in the postseason. Trey Savage will start game 1 tonight for the Blue Jays. Now, from the Blue Jays standpoint, with their roster, Bo Bichette, who has missed a lot of time here since early September, has not been on any of the postseason rosters for the Blue Jays so far. He's officially on their roster after he dealt with a knee injury. And what's interesting about the Bo Bichette situation is he's not going to play shortstop, doesn't sound like. Sounds like he's either going to play second base or he's going to DH. The Blue Jays have been playing Andres Gimenez at shortstop. He's done a nice job. It sounds like the Blue Jays just don't want Bichette to put that kind of pressure on his knee at such a demanding position. But here's the caveat to that. If Bo Bichette does play second base tonight or at some point in this series, he hasn't played second base in the major leagues. I mean, talk about a spot to go play a new position. We have tons of experience with that in San Diego of guys moving around and having to go from shortstop to second base and shortstop to right field. We make a huge deal out of it. So think about that for a second. You're going to put a guy totally unfamiliar. And by the way, second base, it's not that easy. You talk about the double play turn with your back to first base, back to the action. There are some real intricacies of playing second base. But Bo Bichette sounds like confirmed now. He will be on the roster. And to me, I get it. Right now, the Blue Jays were playing Isaiah Kiner-Falefa at second base in their lineup on most days. Look, Bo Bichette's a great hitter, and he's a key part of this Blue Jays team. And against the Dodgers, you want him in the lineup. You got to try. If he's healthy enough to hit, you have got to try to get him in the lineup. So I don't fault the Blue Jays at all. He doesn't need to be 100%. If he goes out there tonight and makes 2 errors at second base, then I guess they're going to have to revisit maybe how they deploy him. Maybe he's a DH. The problem is, if he's a DH, it doesn't allow them to then maybe use George Springer in the DH spot, which they've done. Springer was dealing with the knee issue after he got hit by a pitch in the knee in the ALCS. So him playing second base does give the Blue Jays more versatility. So I think they want to do that, but we'll see how it shakes out. Bottom line is, they need his bat in the lineup, and I get it that they want his bat in the lineup, and he's a great player, and he's somebody that if he's good enough to go, you got to roll him out there. As far as the Dodgers, the notes on their roster, really a very unfortunate situation. Alex Vesia not on the roster, dealing with what the Dodgers called yesterday a deeply personal family matter. So certainly you wish all the best to Alex Vesia and his family as they deal with that. We'll see what his status is for the remainder of the series. He is not on the roster. Obviously, important left-handed reliever. Tanner Scott also not on the roster. The Dodgers putting Will Klein, a reliever, on the roster. So aside really from that, their roster looks very similar to how it's looked. Look, they're going to probably go as far as their starting pitching takes them. If their starting pitching pitches the way they've pitched this postseason, Dodgers, unfortunately, are going to be a very, very hard team to beat. And this Blue Jays team is good. I will say this. I expect this will be a much better series than the Dodgers against the Brewers. I don't see the Blue Jays, especially with home field advantage. I do not see the Blue Jays getting just blown out in this series. I don't. I think we'll have a competitive series. Dodgers are tough to beat. If Snell, Yamamoto, Ohtani, Glasnow, they pitch the way they pitched in this postseason, it's going to be tough. It will. But we shall see how it all works out for the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. All right, quick segment. Like I said, my fault. We'll step aside. When we come back, we'll do our roster assessment. We'll dive into the Padres roster as we continue to roll along here, 8 to 10 here on 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt filling in for Ben and Woods on this Friday morning. We're back after this. This hour on 97.3 The Fan is brought to you by Staples. Your local Staples has hot deals and super low prices throughout the store on everything for your business. And right now at Staples, save up to $125 off your print order. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for details. Ends November 1st. Plus, save even more with the Easy Rewards program at Staples. Before we dive into our Padres roster assessment, let's do a quick check of traffic with Kelly Danek.
From the 855 Get Ross Traffic Center, protecting San Diego after accidents or injury, here's Kelly Danek.
Traffic is brought to you by Toyota of Poway, voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today. Got a few problems here in National City, northbound 5 before Civic Center, a collision not showing if lanes are blocked, still clearing an accident up ahead near 6th Avenue. Also, northbound 805 before Imperial, there is a collision involving a car and a semi. It's over to the right shoulder. Traveling on South 805 before El Cajon Boulevard, reports of a stalled vehicle in the second lane from the left, westbound King Freeway just before 25th Street. Got a collision involving several vehicles. This got the fast lane blocked. Toyota Poway has been voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today with APRs as low as 0% and tons of new Toyotas on the ground. No tricks, only treats during the Trucktober sales event happening now only at Toyota Poway or online at toyotaofpoway.com in the heart of San Diego. I'm Kelly Danek, San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
All right, so let's dive into our roster assessment. Sam Levitt with you, 97.3 The Fan, Friday morning, filling in for Ben and Woods until 10 a.m. Okay, so where are the Padres right here, right now, as we begin the World Series tonight, as far as their roster? Now, let's be clear about a couple of things as we take a look at this. There are locks. There are guys on the 40-man roster that are maybes, that will probably enter spring training battling for spots. Position players. When you look at the San Diego Padres, I think one of the good things about where they are right now, and there's a lot of work to be done, there's no doubt about it, but one of the good things about where they are right now, I think out of position player, bullpen, and starting rotation, 2 out of the 3 groups from a core standpoint, you're pretty much set. When you look at the position player group, to me on the 40-man roster right now, there are 8 locks. Who are the locks? Okay, they're pretty obvious. If you're a Padres fan, you could probably name them off the top of your head right now. Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Merrill. I'm going to assume for this conversation, the Padres are picking up the option on Ramon Laureano, Gavin Sheets, Jake Cronenworth, Xander Bogaerts, Freddie Fermin. That's 8 players, 8 locks. Now, the interesting part about looking at those 8 locks, you could almost make a lineup with them. You'd need one more. You'd need a first base DH type, right? Gavin Sheets hypothetically could play first base if you needed him to. And again, I'm not saying that's what the Padres are going to do. We're just looking at the group here. You'd need a first base DH type because either Sheets is your first baseman or DH, and then you've got to fill the other spot out of that group right there. But I will say, to me, it's a very good place to start as far as your lineup when you can look at 7-8 spots and say, yeah, there's no question marks on what the Padres are going to look like as far as their lineup. Now, what do they need? Well, we'll get into it a little bit more in the 9 a.m. hour. They certainly could use more power. I think there are a couple of names at the very top of the first baseman DH type list that if they could find a way to spend the money on it, I think makes so much sense. So much sense. There are a couple of names at the top of that list that forget the money standpoint, forget what the budget, the payroll will or will not be, are such perfect fits in this free agent market for exactly what the Padres need as far as a power hitting first base type. There are a couple of names on the market this offseason who fit that mold. Exactly. But you're looking at 8 locks. The other position players on the 40-man, and again, you're going to get to spring training and you're going to have so many more names that are competing for these spots. But on the 40-man right now, that's where you got to focus on. Mason McCoy, Will Wagner, Bryce Johnson, Tirso Ornelas. look, I'd assume that at least a couple of those guys are going to be on your roster. Who knows? You might have those guys all start at AAA. It's hard to say right now because you got to see what the options are at spring training. But those are the 4 guys on the 40-man right now that are going to be back that you would say are certainly options from a position player standpoint. But again, you need one more quote unquote starter to make it to 9 locks, and then you're going to have a bench. And again, right now, you could kind of look at their locks and say, okay, the only 2 spots sort of that are question marks there are first base and DH. Go around the diamond. Laureano in left, Merrill in center, Tatis in right, third base is Manny, shortstop Xander, second base Cronenworth. Now, who knows? Could Jake move back to first base? Depending on what their offseason looks like, I guess that's a possibility. But let's assume Jake's at second base right now. And first base, question mark. DH, question mark. I think you could make the argument that Gavin Sheets should be, for the most part, an everyday player heading into next year. I also think you could make the argument with Gavin that he's a really valuable bat to have coming off the bench on a lot of days. I think Gavin Sheets will play. Is he going to be a bona fide everyday player? That may depend on what your offseason looks like. There is an argument to be had that if the Padres have a very productive offseason, that you'd kind of almost hope that Gavin Sheets is more of a guy that's going to play part-time, be a big bat off the bench. That would kind of be, I think, the ideal scenario, because if Gavin's in the lineup every day, to me, it's not a bad thing necessarily. The guy's going to give you some pop. But to me, that means you're going to have a bench that's probably pretty similar to this past year, because Gavin's going to stand out as the guy that needs to play most days. So you could make the argument that what Gavin Sheets' situation is heading into next season is probably pretty good indicator of what their offseason is or is not. But position player-wise, I mean, I think you have to feel very, very good about where they're at. From a core standpoint, do they need more power? Could a big bat be a huge help? Obviously. But where they are right now, do you feel pretty good about their lineup here on October 24th? I do. It's not the most glaring concern. Now, their bullpen, very similar situation. Let's say they have 8 guys in that bullpen, okay? The locks. To me, there's 7 of them. Mason Miller, obviously. Jeremiah Estrada, obviously. Adrian Morejon, obviously. Now, I'm going to preface, because I know somebody out there is screaming at the radio or the phone or the computer or the YouTube, whatever, and saying, well, hold on a second. What if Mason Miller and or Adrian Morejon are in the rotation? We're going to get to that. For this discussion, they're in my bullpen. This is the Sam Levitt Padres roster. They're in my bullpen. Mason Miller, Jeremiah Estrada, Adrian Morejon, locks. David Morgan, lock. Wandy Peralta, lock. Yuki Matsui, guys under contract, lock. Bradley Rodriguez, I'm locking Bradley. Guy was on the postseason roster. You're telling me he's not going to be on the opening day roster next year? I find that very hard to believe. So that's 7 right there. I mean, you're looking at other options on the 40-man that hypothetically could be in your bullpen. And again, there's going to be a ton of guys at spring training battling for these spots that we don't even know their names right now. Other options. Johnny Burrito is probably going to be back from injury. Kyle Hart, Brian Hoeing, Alec Jacob, Ron Marinaccio, Sean Reynolds, Omar Cruz. A lot of guys that you could throw in that mix. Hey, Omar Cruz might be making starts for you. We'll see. Look, I love, and again, I'm putting Miller and Morejon in my bullpen right now. I think the Padres are almost set. If those guys stay in the pen, are almost set bullpen-wise. I really do. I mean, that's a really good bullpen. Now, notably, I didn't include Robert Suarez there because I can't include Robert Suarez there. There's a very good chance Robert's opting out. And if Robert can go get a big deal somewhere, more years, more money, he's probably going to do it. And I think there's a very, very legitimate chance that Robert Suarez is not a Padre in 2026. I love Robert. I think he gets a lot of flack for somebody who's really reliable and has been really good for this team for the most part. But I think that's a spot when you talk about payroll, when you talk about what the Padres need, it's actually, I think, pretty obviously a spot where they could afford to lose Robert. Remember, Jason Adam, you hopefully get back at some point in the season. Your bullpen should be a major strength once again with those names that are locks. Should be a major, major strength once again. When we come back, I like the lineup. I like the bullpen. The rotation we got to talk about. We'll do that when we return right here on 97.3 The Fan. 9 a.m. here on 97.3 The Fan on this Friday morning, a very foggy, sort of ugly Friday morning, at least where we are here in Kearney Mesa. Good to have you with us. Sam Levitt with you, filling in for Ben and Woods this morning, taking you up until at 10 a.m. when we flip things over to the Braden Soprenet Show. By the way, a happy birthday to Mark Grant. It's Mark Grant's birthday today. Padres just put that out on Twitter. I got a little notification here. I want to make sure that I read this right. Hopefully it is Mark's birthday, October 24th. Let's see here. Let me put on my trusty Twitter X account here. Yeah, happy birthday, Mud. So a very, very happy birthday to our friend Mark Grant, lovingly known as Mud, and does a fantastic job all season long. So happy birthday, Mud. Hopefully Mud's listening today in Alpine. Yes. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mud. Maybe I'll see Mud again on my way to spring training. Last year on the way to spring training, I kid you not, I'm driving out on the, I guess the 8 it is. Yeah, the 8. I'm driving east, heading towards Alpine. And I've made it a yearly tradition on my way to spring training to stop at Cafe Adesso, of course, owned by the Musgroves. And Joe's mom, Diane, I've run into her there multiple years in a row. They do a fantastic job. In fact, Cafe Adesso, if I recall correctly, Adam, they were part of the Ben and Woods Christmas extravaganza this past year, providing coffee. So that was great. And Mrs. Musgrove was here. So I go out there on my way. It's, right off the highway, quick stop. Feels right? Cafe Adesso, start of spring training, start of baseball season. And who do I run into on my way to spring training? Now, of course, Mud out in Alpine makes sense. Mud, right there getting this cup of coffee on my way to spring training. Could not have been a better situation, indicator for spring training, how things were going to go. It was just it's a great moment seeing Mud on the way to spring training at Cafe Adesso in Alpine. Terrific. Yes,
I think he's
Adam.
got a bedroom there. He just lives at Cafe Adesso.
I think he goes there a lot.
It's got delicious coffee, by the way.
Yes, it's fantastic. I think he goes there a lot, and Mud, obviously very friendly with everybody, knows everybody. That's the thing about Mud. And again, happy birthday to Mud. Mud he's just a good guy. The guy you see on TV, the friendly personality, the funny personality. I will tell you, that is the guy Mark Grant is off the air all the time. Fun, funny, welcoming. You can talk to him about anything. I can stroll into the TV booth and strike up a conversation. He'll ask you how you're doing. Happy birthday, Mark Grant. Great guy, and hope Mud enjoys the day. All guests on 97.3 The Fan appear on the David P. Shapiro Fan Hotline. David P. Shapiro, criminal defense attorneys helping good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime since 2010. Visit davidpshapirolaw.com. Well, before we went to break, we were doing our Padres roster assessment, and we will get to the final piece of the roster, which I think right now is, to me, by far and away, the most glaring issue on the roster. And I say issue in the sense of you've got a lot to figure out with this rotation. There are a lot of different things going on with this rotation. And to me, when you look at where they are right now with their 40-man and these quote-unquote locks that we've gone through, yes, there are locks in the rotation, assuming everybody's healthy and ready to go. But you've got a lot to figure out. You've got a lot to figure out with that rotation. Before we get to the rotation, though, Adam and I were kind of going back and forth during the commercial break, and I don't know if I'm breaking radio protocol here to bring up our off-air conversation, although it's nothing crazy. We're just talking about what we were discussing in the last segment of the 8 a.m. hour with the offense, and Adam made the point, and Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Adam made the point, which falls in line with what we were talking about. Look, there are a lot of spots from an everyday player standpoint that unless something crazy happens, somebody gets traded, you lock in right now. We'll do it again. Laureano left, Maryland center, Tatis in right, Adam Klug, we agree. Those three locked in.
We agree.
Okay.
I concur.
Manny Machado, third base, Xander Bogaerts, shortstop, Jake Cronenworth, second base. You always have the option to move Jake to first. If you go, let's say, hey, you never know with AJ
You're locking
Preller.
in Jake Cronenworth for a position.
Yes, you're locking him in the lineup. We agree with that. Okay. Gavin Sheets, I lock him into the roster. What his role is, I think, is up for debate. I think that very much will depend on what your offseason is. Because first base and DH, those are the two spots in the lineup.
For me, locked in at catcher.
For me, right. For me, locked in a catcher. So you've got 7 locks, and then you've got your first base DH spots where there's malleability there. There's a chance Gavin Sheets. Thank you. There's a chance Gavin Sheets is
like
there.
A thesaurus under your pillow.
Hey, look, the play-by-play, you got to work in words. You got to be a student of vocabulary, Adam. First base and DH is where it gets not tricky, but there are major question marks about what that looks like. Gavin Sheets, hypothetically, could be an everyday guy, which, by the way, to his credit, especially after the deadline, he forced his way into the lineup with how good he was in August and September. He forced his way back in after the trades for O'Hearn and Laureano put him on the bench. So I want to give Gavin Sheets all the credit in the world. He will be on this team, I'd assume. But I think you can make the argument that if the Padres have the type of offseason you want them to have, that you'd kind of like Gavin Sheets, maybe as somebody who's a little bit more coming off the bench. Not that he's never going to start, but wouldn't it be nice to have Gavin Sheets as a power bat off the bench because you've gone out and assessed first base, DH with some power? Now, and this is also what Adam and I were talking about right after we went to commercial. The Padres need more slug. They need more power. I think we all agree with that sentiment. We saw what this offense was and what it wasn't in 2025. It is a little bit of a tricky situation when you're saying that there's a large element of something they need while also acknowledging that, well, we agree right now, 7 out of the 9 spots in your lineup are going to be the same players that were in this lineup in 2025. So, yes, the signing a big power bat, at least somebody who could give you 25 home runs. We were throwing around the name Rhys Hoskins during the break. I'm not saying, Hoskins is signed. This was the last year of his deal. He actually will be a free agent. But not forget Rhys Hoskins for a second. When you're looking at a guy like that, let's assume the Padres aren't, for this argument, the Padres aren't going to go out and sign what I would say are some premier power bats. Who am I talking about? Pete Alonso. Who am I talking about? Josh Naylor. Oh, what a fit that would be, Josh Naylor. By the way, what a fit Pete Alonso would be. Okay, now, are the Padres going to have the budget flexibility to go sign a guy like Alonso if he commands a longer term big money deal? I don't know. Look, we're going to find out what the payroll number is. Every offseason, there's been reporting on what that number is, and every offseason, it feels like it ends up being a little bit different than what's initially reported. And I mean in a good way, a higher payroll than what's initially reported at the start of the offseason. So I'm not going to sit here on October 24th and make believe that I know what the payroll is going to be and what the tax situation is going to be. I do not at this point. But let's assume for a second that they aren't going to go out and dive into those waters. And those waters, I'm talking about a Pete Alonso who could command a long-term big money deal. Tell you what, you think Josh Naylor is getting a little deal? I'm not saying he's going to get mega deal. Josh Naylor is going to get years and money. He's a good player who hits home runs. From a baseball standpoint, Alonso or Naylor, I think, would be perfect fits for the San Diego Padres. They slot in right at first base, and they hit a lot of home runs. Need I say more? But let's live in a world where that's not going to happen this winter. Well, if you're going out to the free agent market, the reason you bring up somebody like Hoskins, well, he probably is kind of like your next tier. Rhys Hoskins in his career, home runs, 18, 34, 29, 10 in a shortened season in 2020, 27, 30, 26. He only played 90 games this year, hit 12. You can almost pencil this guy in. Still, he's only 32. You can only, maybe he's 33 now. No, he's still 32. He'll be 33 next season. You can pencil him in. If healthy, I would say right now, based on his track record for at least 20, 25 home runs, right? If he's healthy. He was making $17 million a year the last couple of years. Is he going to make quite that again? I'd probably say it's going to be a little bit lower. Could you get him in on a 1 or 2 year deal for something that's manageable, for something in the, let's say, $10 to $15 million range? Maybe. That might be the type of player that would make a lot of sense, that can provide some pop, that can play first base, that can certainly DH as well. If it's not going to be the tippy top of that kind of market, you're probably looking from a free agent standpoint at something like that. Now, keep in mind, if the Padres, they have all these long-term commitments, if they don't have a ton of money to spend, and I'm not going to sit here and dive into the payroll numbers right now, but yeah, eating up, 12, 13, whatever that number is, $1 million, that may even be a little bit much for where they're at payroll-wise. That's going to be a key question, as always, of what is your payroll going to be. But if you can do it, it's probably who you're looking at free agent-wise. You're looking at a next tier type of guy who could play first base, who could DH, but is not going to be an Alonso, a Naylor, who I think would be perfect. More of a Rhys Hoskins type.
So the list of available free first basemen in terms of free agency, it's not very deep. You mentioned Alonso and Naylor. The next best available first baseman is Ryan O'Hearn, followed by Carlos Santana, Luis Arraez, Paul Goldschmidt, Rhys Hoskins. But what if you got creative, Sam? What if we went to a free agent second baseman to potentially either play second base and move Jake to first, or this exact same player who I'm about to name has experience playing first base as well.
I'm looking at the list.
31 years old. His name is Brandon Lowe from the Tampa Bay Rays. Hit 31 home runs last year. 31 years old, 785 OPS. He has played in the outfield. He has played second base. He has played first base. I don't think he's going to command a huge contract.
Let me see here.
I've got his career stats here. 31 bombs last year and 21 in each of them.
Is this Lau? Yeah, but just so you know.
Lau?
This is the Lau, yes.
Okay.
Brandon Lau.
I like to call him Lowe. Is that okay?
Well, his name's Brandon Lau.
Says who?
Says everyone.
21, 61. He has.
There was Josh. There were the two Lows, the LOWs on the Rays.
He's got 73 home runs in the last 3 years, Sam.
Sure. And he was a 4-WAR player this past year. Look, I'm totally with that plan as far as just generally. Hey, you could sell me on moving Jake back to first base. Look, that may
or
be
Lau to first base, whatever. That's
right. But you could, if you were able to get a middle infielder. Now, are you going to get a middle infielder that can slug a lot? Well, that might be
a Lau has 73 homers in the last 3 years.
That's a good name. It's a good name, but he's only 31. I think a lot of this is going to come down to what your payroll number is, the flexibility you have, and how creative AJ Preller can get. I mean, that's what it's about. We said this a lot last year on the Wednesday nights inside San Diego baseball. We said this over and over and over. By the way, somebody in the chat says Hoskins has a mutual option on his deal. He might. It's not important enough right now. We're just spitballing names here to look into it. But AJ is going to have to be really creative, right? There are going to be at least some limitations on payroll. He's not going to go. Look, I would be shocked if they're out there dealing in a Pete Alonso market that's going to be a big deal this year. I'd be very surprised with that. Now, can they spend money? Yeah. But they're going to have to be very creative. Make no mistake about it. Even when we talk about all these locks from the position player standpoint, there is going to have to be an element for AJ of hitting more like he did in 2024 than he did on 2025 with some of the quote unquote, not only older players, but kind of the savvier moves. And AJ did hit on some of them in 2025. Gavin Sheets was a huge one, was a huge success. But let's be honest, Jason Hayward was not. Martin Maldonado. The tough thing about Maldonado is what exactly were you expecting? He came in and he caught, and they wanted him to catch, and to me, he kind of did what you thought he was going to do. But it was not like we're going to sit here and say Martin Maldonado was a sterling success. Let some other names that are more in line with the not. Yuli Gurriel didn't really work out. Connor Joe didn't really work out. 2024, David Peralta worked. Donovan Solano worked. He's going to have to hit more like 24 than he did in 25. And by the way, I'm not even blaming AJ here. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do when you're dealing with those types of older players that you don't know what you're going to get. Nobody could have predicted when AJ went out and signed Peralta and Solano. None of us thought that they were going to have that kind of impact on this team, but he hit. He hit on him, and he's going to have to do something like it again. You're going to ask AJ to do a little bit of a better job in that sense this year than it was last year, more like 2024, how it played out. Now, Sheets was a great one, and he deserves credit for that. And the Padres deserve credit for that, for bringing in Gavin Sheets, a guy that clearly had power, and he found himself. And now, hey, we're looking at Gavin as a part of this team moving forward. I don't know that necessarily you need him to start every day, but as a guy on your bench, as a guy that can start, that can provide home runs, that can play a few different positions, left field, first base. Yeah, Gavin's going to be a part of this team moving forward, which is great, which is a credit to AJ and the Padres. But it's going to have to be another very, very creative offseason for AJ, because this is not, and you know this if you're a Padres fan, this is not a spot where we're going out and giving $280 million to Xander Bogaerts. I mean, it would kind of shock me if they're in those waters, right? With where the payroll is. Now, what exactly the payroll situation is going to be a very important question. It's going to determine what your flexibility is here in the offseason and determine what you go for, what you don't, even at the more middle level tier of free agents. But AJ's going to have to get creative. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a trade or two. We know. And hey, look, you can very well make the argument that AJ has done his best work the last couple of years when he has not had ultimate financial flexibility, when he has had to look at his roster, say, I can't just go out and spend money and I've got to figure it out. Now, the fascinating part about that, and we need to talk about Mason Miller and Adrian Morejon. We'll say one thing I'm not doing terribly well here on my fill-ins is I tease something and then I get caught up in the conversation and I never get to what I teased. I promise, though, when we come back, I'm going to talk about Miller and Morejon. If I don't do it, you can hold my feet to the fire. But AJ's done some of his best work, maybe his best work, period, the last couple of years when he's had some limitations, when he's had to work within constraints, payroll-wise. Can he do that again? Can he hit more than he misses on some of those little moves? We shall see. Let's check traffic with Kelly Danick. We're back with more Padres Talk and Beyond after we check in with Kelly. 9:26 here on 97.3 The Fan on this Friday morning. Sam Levitt filling in for Ben and Woods up until 10 a.m. when we flip things over to today's edition of the Braden Soprenin Show. Good to have you with us. We've had a nice time here the last couple of days for a couple of hours, 8 to 10. Adam Klug with me here in the studio. He is just enthralled right now by the programming on MLB Network, on the NFL Network. He's got a lot of commentary about the NFL Network and the personnel. Like Manti Te'o's up there. Who knew Manti Te'o was on NFL Network? But there he is. Manti Te'o doing his thing on NFL Network. And we just saw Joe Flacco talk. We'll touch on that in the next segment, that dining alone thing, because that's actually a great segment for me, I think, in particular, because that's right up my alley. Sports Talk on the Fan is presented by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much these days, but you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game every Sunday on CBS and Paramount Plus all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started today. Speaking of the NFL, my Jets, 0-7. Aaron Glenn, you're doing a great job so far. 0-7. Same old Jets is what they are here in 2025. All right, I have been teasing two things here the last 2 days. One thing during this show, and that was finishing up this Padres position player, I should say Padres roster assessment, but then also discussing, I think, what is in this entire conversation about the Padres roster, the elephant in the room. Before we get to the elephant in the room, let's take a look at what is, to me, it's the most glaring thing on this roster assessment, and that is the Padres starting rotation in 2025. 2026 rather. Let's assume a couple of things for a second. Let's assume Michael King is not back. Let's assume Dylan Cease is not back. Let's assume those two things for this discussion. Who are your locks? We went over the locks for the position players. We went over the locks for the bullpen. And there are a lot of them in those two groups. The starting pitching, there are not. The locks, 3. When healthy, Nick Pivetta, Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish. Now, Nick Pivetta, you've got all the confidence in the world in what he did this past year, and I see no reason why Nick Pivetta cannot replicate what he did this past year in 2026. He's going to be your opening day starter in all likelihood, unless the Padres want to do something with a Darvish or a Musgrove, hometown guy. Maybe, but from a last year standpoint, it's quite obviously Pivetta. Yu Darvish, that's a question mark. What is Yu's health heading into next year? I think it is probably unfair to expect Yu Darvish to just pencil him in for 25, 30 starts at this point with where his health has been. Now, can you be a contributor to this team? Absolutely. Was Yu good at times this season? Yes. There were also a lot of starts, including the postseason, where it did not go well. The point is, it's very, very hard. When you look at this rotation, is Yu Darvish, when healthy, a lock in it? Yeah. But do you know what you're getting from Yu, both starts-wise, innings-wise, and performance-wise? That's a hard thing to know right now. It just is. And it's no knock on Yu. He's had a great career. He's still got 3 years left on his contract with the Padres. I know people like to throw around this idea that he would retire. I find that very hard to believe when you've got that many years and the money he has left. But it's a big question mark with Yu Darvish. Joe Musgrove, look, the question with him is just going to be coming back from Tommy John. I've got all the faith in the world in Joe, of all people, to put in the work and be good coming back from Tommy John. But you're always going to have a little question mark next to Joe's name heading into the year, just because we haven't seen him in a while and he's coming back from Tommy John. And by the way, How many innings is Joe going to throw next year in his first season off injury? He's not going to go out there and give you 200 innings next year. So do I think Joe's going to be effective? I do. But there's always just with any, it could be Tarek Skubal coming off Tommy John. Doesn't matter. You're always going to have a little question mark, right? Next to that guy's name. Those are your locks. And like I just spelled out for you, Pivetta, no question mark there. But Darvish and Musgrove, you've got question marks there with those two guys. And that's the locks. After that, the 40-man, you got Randy Vasquez, who I'm not going to put as a lock, although I think he's pretty darn close. In my mind, based on what they have right now, and I'll tell you why Randy's a lock in our next segment as I continue to tease. I can't. I just continue to tease this Mason Miller. And
Coming up next
Moreau.
week.
I get too caught up. It's too much to talk about, Adam. Anyway, Randy, I'm going to tell you why he's pretty close to a lock for me coming up. But Randy, I'm not going to put with the lock category right now. JP Sears, Johnny Brito, Matt Waldron. That's your 40-man. Now you want to tell me Omar Cruz, maybe.
You want me to give Ben and Woods the Monday off so you can finish up your thoughts here?
Brian Hoeing, maybe. But again, when I'm talking locks, Pivetta, Musgrove, Darvish when healthy. And with Musgrove and Darvish, I think fairly, you got some question marks there. And it's two different things. I don't want to make it like I'm doubting Joe. I've got all the faith in the world that Joe is going to come back and be really good and be a big-time pitcher for this team. Anybody coming off Tommy John's going to have some sort of just little question mark there of what it's going to look like when they come back, especially initially. But hopefully Joe's great, and he's ready to rock, and he's a leader of this. He's a huge part of this team, no doubt about it. Now, the elephant in the room, finally, and I am going to tease it again, but the elephant in the room is this. Mason Miller and Adrian Morejon. When I spell out to you the rotation for the Padres, there are needs. There are big-time needs, and they're going to have to get filled somehow, some way. And one of the options the San Diego Padres have is to take one of, or both, of Miller and Morejon and try to stretch them out and insert them into their rotation. I will give you my opinion on that when we return here on 97.3 The Fan. We roll along on this Friday morning, 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt with you, filling in for Ben in Woods. We'll flip things over to Braden Soprenit at the very top of the hour. I will finally talk about Mason Miller and Adrian Morahone and the idea, and maybe we'll throw in David Morgan into this conversation as well, the idea that they could be converted into starters for 2026. I've been teasing this for 2 days. And my goodness, I'm going to deliver you something here.
Better be worth the wait.
But first, we check traffic.
We tease something else first.
From the 855 Get Ross Traffic Center, protecting San Diego after accidents or injury, here's Kelly Danick.
Traffic is brought to you by Toyota Poway, voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today. Just a couple of problems wrapping up our morning drive. One is this collision eastbound 8 before the 1683 appears to be in the 2 or 3 left lanes, and Poinsettia off-ramp southbound 5 got a collision. Oh, and keep in mind, another closure, northbound 5 is going to be closed from the 8 to Mission Bay Drive from 9 o'clock this evening till 5 o'clock Monday morning. That is all weekend, so plan around that, plan accordingly. Again, that's northbound 5 freeway will be closed for road work from the 8 to Mission Bay Claremont Drive. Toyota of Poway has been voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today, with APRs as low as 0% and tons of new Toyotas on the ground. No tricks, only treats during the Trucktober sales event happening now only at Toyota of Poway or online at toyotaofpoway.com in the heart of San Diego. I'm Kelly Danick, San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
So, Sam, you got any big plans this weekend?
Do I have any big plans? I do. I'm catching a flight out of here. Sun has come out, so I'm more optimistic about my flight leaving on time.
How's your fantasy team looking?
A fantasy team, I beat whoever I was playing last week. I am playing Matt Scraby this week, and he had a lot of guys playing in the Thursday night game. So, yeah, look, I think we should touch on this NBA betting story. Maybe we can preview Game 1 of the World Series. No, it's time to lock in here once and for all. Okay, I understand the argument, the reasoning behind, and I want to focus on Miller and Morahone really in this conversation. I understand why it's appealing. I just laid out to you the Padres starting rotation. Yeah, they've got needs. Pivetta, great. Darvish, he's a lock in there if he's healthy, but what are you going to get from you, Darvish? That's a fair question heading into next year. Joe Musgrove, absolutely. Lock, healthy. Off Tommy John. You got a little question mark there with Joe just because everybody coming off Tommy John's going to get that. And after that, look, I would say, and I'll get to why in a moment, more so, to me, Randy Vasquez has proved himself enough where, to me, Randy should be in this rotation. Now, is he going to have to battle for a spot in spring training? Maybe. But to me, I think Randy's done a great job for the most part. I think you can lock him into a back end of the rotation spot as currently constructed. So I understand you're looking at a rotation that's got question marks, a lot of them. You could look at a Mason Miller or an Adrian Morahone and say those guys are more valuable by trying at least to stretch them out, to make them into starters, especially somebody like Miller, who you've got multiple years of control left, who's done it fairly recently. I get it. I understand the argument. I understand the idea of it, that if you can take Miller, who has multiple pitches that work, his slider's tremendous, his changeup's really good, the fastball's the fastball. Yeah, could Mason Miller, based on his arsenal, be a really, really good starting pitcher this year? Maybe. I don't know the answer to that question, but maybe. If you did it with Morahone, who has starting experience years ago, could he be really good and be more valuable to you than being a guy who's going to throw a grand total of 73 innings, which he did this past year? Mason Miller threw a total between the A's and the Padres of 61 innings. If you could stretch those guys out and have them be really good starters, are they more valuable? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. And you have a need. So I understand the argument. From the Miller standpoint, I understand if you're looking at the trade and saying, hey, we gave up Leonidas DeVries. At the time of that trade, a lot of us said, it's a lot to give up for a reliever, even of Mason Miller's caliber. And some people, I don't think I said this, but some people even made the case of the only way it makes sense is if you convert Miller into a starting pitcher ultimately. So let me say, I understand the argument to it. I understand the value proposition. I get it. But I'm not doing it if I'm the Padres. They may. If I were calling the shots, I would not. And I'll tell you why. I don't think in their scenarios of Morahone and Miller that you want to play with fire to what is a major, major strength of your team. And there's a few ways I think you're playing with fire if you stretch those guys out. Even if those guys go on and be more valuable as starters. Look, there's a very good chance that a Mason Miller gets told this offseason he's going to go stretch out, and they're going to try it. And look, he can always go back to the bullpen if it doesn't work. I get that. But a few reasons why I'd avoid it. I think it's playing with fire. Number one, the injury issue. These are guys, both of them, Miller and Morahone, that have dealt with injuries before. Mason Miller came up as a starter in 2023 with the A's. In May of 23, he was put on the IL with right forearm tightness. Okay, he missed a lot of time in 2023. He came back late that year. They moved into the bullpen. He was dominant. He's been healthy. I wouldn't mess with it. Not right now. I wouldn't. You've got a guy who's healthy, a guy who is certainly at the end of the year in the postseason looked like the best reliever in the game. That's what you have in Miller. You have maybe right now the best reliever in the sport. That's how good he was for the Padres. I think you're playing with fire. Same thing with Adrian Morahone. You want to talk about injury history. Let's not forget that Morahone, now, last couple of years, there have been two things about Morahone which have been fantastic. Number one, he's been great. And number two, he has found his health. He's done both those things. And Morahone, when we talk about the best relievers in the game, he's right there. He's right there, especially from the left side. He's right there. He's tremendous. I mean, let's go through some of the injury history for Morahone. He dealt in 2019, a left shoulder issue, had Tommy John surgery in 2021, dealt with a shoulder issue in 2022, dealt with an elbow sprain, right knee inflammation in 2023. It's only the last couple of years that Morahone has found this level of health. I look at that and it scares me. It does. And the last thing I want to happen to this team is that you try to stretch these guys out and one of two things happen or both happen. A, they get hurt, and or B, they're not that good. Because then what have you really done? You've taken a major strength. And by the way, nobody seems to talk about this part either. Your bullpen is a major, major, major strength of yours right now heading into next year based on the names we went over. A major, major strength. Who exactly is replacing Mason Miller and Adrian Morahone? I know people like to throw around, the idea of, hey, you can find relievers that throw hard. Relievers, and there's a little truth to that. You can go find relievers and they can be very volatile. One guy who was not good the year prior, they hook up with Ruben Niebla in the pitching lab and they find it, and all of a sudden you've got the next Jeremiah Estrada. I get it. But we're not talking about just run-of-the-mill relievers here in Morahone and Miller. We are talking about creme de la creme, tippy top quality relievers. And personally, I wouldn't mess with it. I think your bullpen is a major strength. And it's going to be a big reason if you have a great season next year. They're going to be a big reason why. And I don't think it's super replaceable. I don't. I think you take one or two of those guys out of the bullpen, that's a hard spot to replace. And you want to talk about something that can sink your team really quickly? A bullpen that's not good can do it. Now, you might be out there shouting at your radio. You might be out there shouting at your TV, your Odyssey app, whatever it might be, and saying, well, hey, Sam, that's all great with the bullpen, but look at our starting rotation. We got to figure it out. And this might be a way to figure it out. I understand that. Trust me, I get the argument. My point is, I think it's playing with fire. I think it's playing with fire from an injury standpoint. I think it's playing with fire from a performance standpoint, not quite knowing what you're going to get. You know what you have in those guys as relievers. You don't know what you have in them as starters. You don't. And it's also weakening what is a major strength of your club that you can write it in right now. You know that bullpen's going to be good right now, even without a Jason Adam for part of the year, even without really knowing what you're going to get from, Wandy, who was good. A Bradley Rodriguez certainly has a lot of potential, but we don't quite know what he is yet. I just think it's playing with fire. I understand the argument. I understand the value proposition. I get it. And by the way, I'm going to fully get it if they decide to do it with a Mason Miller. I will understand it. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to sit here and tell you I love it or I agree with it. It's not what I think I would do, but I understand it based on his history, based on who he is, based on the fact that you've got him for some time, and based on the fact that he would fill a big time need there if he can be an effective starter and he would be more valuable to you. I get it. I just think it's scary. I think it's a little dangerous. It worries me. It scares me. It feels like playing with fire. So what does that mean? Well, let's say they do stay in the bullpen. It means the Padres got to figure out the rest. They're going to have to figure out this rotation one way or another. And it is going to be the thing of AJ's offseason. I know we talk about slugging the offense, but make no mistake, when you look at this rotation right now, that's where the creativity and AJ's got to cook. That's where he's got to cook. He's going to have to figure out this rotation because it's not where it was the last couple of years at all. But I would love to see him do it without having to go move Miller or Morahone. That's how I'll wrap up the point. I would love to see him go do that in AJ fashion, creative, aggressive, without having to rock the Morahone and Miller boat. We'll see. This hour on 97.3 The Fan is brought to you by Toyota of Poway, voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today. Toyota of Poway has been voted San Diego's #1 Toyota dealer by USA Today, with APRs as low as 0% and tons of new Toyotas on the ground. No tricks, only treats during Trucktober sales event happening now, only at Toyota of Poway or online at toyotaofpoway.com in the heart of San Diego. You see, Adam Klug, I got to the point. And I thought that was a very nice 10 minutes on Miller and Morahone. Worth the wait?
Worth the wait.
Okay.
But you didn't get to the Joe Flacco stuff that you teased.
What's it? Joe Flacco likes eating alone at restaurants. Is that the gist?
Yeah.
So do I. Congrats,
You said
Joe
the quiet
Flacco.
part out loud.
Okay, it took you 40
dads.
years to figure that out. You took you 40 years to figure out that eating at a bar alone is a great way to be. That's what I
like
do.
getting away from the kids every once
That's
in a
what
while.
I do. I eat alone. I'll sit at the bar, make some conversation. You might see me in OB. Come say hello. All right, fun 2 days. Ben and Woods back with you Monday, 6 a.m. Right now, we'll put things over to the Braden Soprenet Show, and I'll talk to you when I talk to you next here on 97.3 The Fan. Have a great weekend, everybody.